Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Renee.
And I'm Greg.
And this module is going to talk through site conflict resolution. We're going to dive into it. So today we're going to talk about the fact that conflicts are going to happen. Doesn't matter how good of a project it is.
You mean not everybody's your friend?
Not everybody is your friend. And those of you that have followed us for quite a while, you understand, right? I mean, QCs really aren't QCs till they're written on the wall inside the Porta-John, so we may not always be the most favorite people. So there's definitely going to be conflicts, and there's definitely ways to seek resolution or to try to head off some of the conflicts we see that continue to occur no matter what the subs are on what projects. So we're going to kind of give you some tips on that today. We're going to talk about conflicts with designers, conflicts with clients or the end user, conflicts with subcontractors, and then we're going to talk about the conflict we see is between different subs on a site. Okay, so diving in, conflicts with designers. Typical conflicts we have with designers are submittal scrub, review time for submittals and RFIs and other documents, tracking of that, site visits. Sometimes they don't really want to do a site visits or they didn't build in enough, as-built, ASI and mod documentation. So those are the basis of the site conflicts. We do have a whole module on tips and tricks for design build projects where we really dive in detail. So this is kind of more of just a summary in this module, but those are a lot the typical conflicts that we see.
And the reason why you may have a conflict with a designer is you're the one that's going to have a direct relationship with them.
Right.
You know, passing submittals, passing as-builts, their site visits, what you're sending, what you're not sending, quit sending me stuff, I need to see this, why didn't you send it to me? And the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
You're not only a QC, you're a mediator, you're a moderator,
Paper pusher.
You're a paper pusher, you're the referee, and
so
the
many times the
babysitter.
referee.
And it just comes with a job, and that's why we love QC.
It is. But all these conflicts with the designers are going to toss time and money right out of the gate for your project. So it's important. So be sure to check out that module on how tips and tricks on how to managing design build projects, because we're going to go into all that in depth. Resolution options, overall, I can sum it up with that one little blurb down there. Upfront open communication. You really got to be on some of those initial meetings with your design team, and upfront you have to make sure that the whole team comes to agreements on how all these things are going to be handled. Meaning review time, meaning yes, we're going to scrub and then we're going to run it through the client before it gets uploaded. This is how we're going to track things. This is your site visits and does it meet contract, and these are the as-built percentages per contract were required and how we're going to get as-builts back and forth and so on. So
yeah, and upfront open communication is really the way to go here. You want to communicate. You want to establish the guardrails of the lanes you're going to operate in.
Right. And be consistent.
Be consistent and document everything, and yeah. you'll be in good shape.
Absolutely. So next we're going to talk about conflicts that sometimes occur with the client. And the reason I put the boxing gloves here is, believe it or not, I actually had a QA pull me into a meeting with the resident engineer on a Corps of Engineer project, and when the meeting started, he threw a pair of boxing gloves on the table. And he thought he was being quirky and funny, and in the end he got reprimanded for it. But he thought that I wanted to box with him. And the resident engineer did not appreciate that. And I do not box with the end users of any federal client. However, as a QC manager, your job is to protect the project and make sure that it goes in per design, and that's for the end user. You're also there, however, to protect the employer that you work for and the contractor, whether it's a subcontractor or a general contractor. If your contractor is doing things per plans and specs and it's in per contract, they can't require more.
They can ask for more and pay for it.
Absolutely.
And add time and money.
But part of your job, though, is to stick up and say, this is in per contract. There's nothing wrong with this end product.
Absolutely.
And that's really what caused the boxing gloves. And in the end, that QA he lost that day, and no gloves had to be put on, and it was definitely the wrong way to handle it. However, that's why I put the boxing gloves up. So please know that as a QC manager, you're gonna run into these conflicts whether you want them or not. And I'm not saying to go swing in straight out of the gate. You got to pick and choose your battles, and you have to pick and choose which ones you want to fight. However, you're gonna have to fight.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, I don't want to have to state the obvious here, but I'm going to. You know, this is fights and conflicts with words,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
and specifications and plans and contract.
Yes.
Contract is your biggest weapon here, and it could be also your
worst enemy.
Your worst enemy
if it's not done right.
You got to make sure that what you're talking about is factual.
Yep.
And per contract.
Yep.
And as long as you're doing that, you'll win every time.
Absolutely. So typical conflicts that we have with end users, especially in the federal arena, review time comes up quite a bit. So in the contract, they are held to a certain review time. Feds typically we see 14 to 30 days. A lot of times they do not adhere to that on every submittal. And it is very important that you track that. You have to track when you turned it over to them and when you get it back. Now, your project manager ultimately will decide and pick and choose when they want to fight that fight. Your job as a QC manager is to not let anything collect dust on your desk. You have to tackle things timely. You have to tackle things in the right order, right? Big stones, small stones, right? So you've got to make sure, though, things that hold up schedules, such as RFIs and or submittals, that they are reviewed timely. So if you've got an end user or a client that is taking more than their review time, your job is to provide that information to your project management team, whether that's a construction manager, a project manager, or an owner if you're a smaller outfit that you work for. And then they're going to choose when they play that card. And as QC, sometimes that's really frustrating because you're banging your head against a wall, you're not getting things back timely, you're being held to the time frames, and your end user's not doing it, and you just want someone to fire back. And I understand that, and you're going to be frustrated, but that ultimately is the card that the PM and the ownership chooses to play. And sometimes they hold on to those until they get in deeper water in another area, and then they say, hey, we've partnered with you. We haven't brought up the fact that you're not reviewing times. Your review times haven't been meeting contract, and we've got that documentation. So we need you to partner with us on this. And they use that as a bargaining chip. So know that that could be a little frustrating. Just go in understanding that and knowing that you've done your job once you track the time and you get that information to your PM. Punch lists are another big piece of conflict. Sometimes the end user won't show up for a punch list walk that's been scheduled with enough time, just as agreed upon. You hold the walk, then they come back in and they want to do additional punches. That's one that we have fought and usually always win on. Anybody can walk into any building. I can walk into a finished building today and I can punch it hard and I can see things that other people haven't seen. Everybody can go in there with blue tape and can punch different things. There always has to be a point where you draw the line in the sand and you say done is done. This does meet the intent of the design. It does, everything that's in there meets the design and specs. And this is a finished product. So punch list can be a conflict.
Now the only caveat to this is that when you're coming in to do your punch list, you know, you're going to have you could have one or two people from the client that you're working for, you know, or you could have a whole army that comes in. And,
sometimes we've had 15 and 20 people walking through, and it's hard to manage.
You're going to need some help, and you're going to need to manage it. But you know, regardless of that, if you've got, you know, you're coming in and the client is punching finishes, that's not the same kind of punch list as a mechanical punch list or an electrical punch list or telecom or, you know, any of these other specialty systems. So that's the only caveat to this. If you've got people coming in for the client that's looking at lipstick and rouge, and then you've got another team that comes in and they're looking at the mechanical, that's just gonna happen.
Absolutely.
And then you've got to merge those punch lists together, but you don't want this group's coming in on this day to look at this, and this group's coming in on this day to look at the exact same thing. You want to get everybody there.
Yeah, you really want to manage 3 different lists, right? You're going to have a red zone list for those doing core federal work. So that's going to be a list of deliverables, and that's going to be something that you take to weekly meetings. You're going to have your commissioning punch list, right? That's being managed between you and your commissioning agent. And then you really want one punch list, one site punch list. And it's going to be a living beast, right? So when you get, above ceiling, you could do above ceiling punches. There's in-wall punches. There's multiple punches, but you don't want to be running 7 punch lists. You just want to keep adding and or showing completion on one punch. That's really the easiest way to manage that.
Well, we could talk hours on
just on punch lists alone.
That's another key conflict that you'll have to manage.
Absolutely. And Datacom or special inspections. Datacom is one that's near and dear to our hearts. We fought with that with some of the bases out west. So those special entities work separate from the end user. Sometimes security fence and security and SCADA and that kind of thing also has special inspectors and special entities. Bottom line is those entities more likely to go rogue on you, more likely to require or ask for things that are not in the contract. And they'll say things like, well, this is a base standard and they missed this and this should have been in there. This is our base standard. Well, I'm sorry, I understand, but we signed a contract, we meaning your GC or sub that you work for, and that what's in the contract we have to provide, and what's not in there would cost money, and that's a change order.
So that brings up a really good point. I mean, when you have you can't see my air quotes, it's a base standard that wasn't caught in an approved design,
right?
Then that is not your fault.
No.
And then what will happen then, that conflict then, if you turn the tables on that and, say, well, we'll go back to the design team, we'll go back to the client, we'll issue an RFI, and we'll figure out what's going on.
And if they deny the RFI because they don't want to spend the money, then it's done.
That happens.
Yeah, it happens. Then it's dead.
Yeah.
And then if they say, oops, we really should have done that, we can't get away with not doing it, then it's a change order.
Yeah, and either way, it's not your fault.
No.
They're just frustrated because they've got blinders on and looking at one specific thing, and
but don't feel like you have to cave to that, right? I mean, this again is your job. So your job is to make sure that your product goes in per plans and specs.
Yeah.
And no more and no less. And if it's less, then you've got to go back and it's on your side to manage to make sure it's brought up. And if they're asking for more, then it's your job to RFI it and see if that's really something they're going to pay for.
Yeah.
Right. And resolution options on these kind of issues, tracking is a must. Tracking takes care of your punch list. Tracking takes care of review times. And then bringing those tracking mechanisms to weekly meetings, right? So when you've got weekly meetings with your client, bring the RFI log, bring the submittal log, right? Say, yeah, we've got 4 RFIs, that you guys are reviewing for us, and it could potentially impact schedule and time for this and this and this. So if you bring those kind of tracking mechanisms to your weekly meeting, it will ultimately be your management's decision on what battles to push. All you can do is present the information, and that usually really does resolve most of the conflicts with the client.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Next, we're going to talk about conflicts with subcontractors. So if you're taking this training as a sub and you're in here, you can say conflicts with general contractors, because this is an open, it goes both ways, right? So examples that we've had, material handling is one of them. A lot of the feds want material on dunnage and covered. This is a very sore subject, especially for the fitters and the utility contractors, because they'll bring pipe out and they want the pipe on dunnage and they want the pipe covered, but it's pipe that's going to go into the dirt, and they don't see the need for that extra cost on their side. If that is a requirement in the contract, that's a requirement and they've got to do it. But I've had folks get extremely frustrated to the point where I've had subcontractors walk out of a prep meeting sometimes with I'm sitting there staring at the client, and the client's staring at me, and I'm like, well, I'll either get them back to the table and make sure they're going to adhere to the contract, or we'll have to make a change. And it's a bad situation to be in. I've been there as a QC manager, but know that material handling is taken very seriously, and it has to be adhered to.
Well, and the other side of material handling too, it could be, it could come out, it could be stored, correctly. It could have a scratch on it. Everything could get scratched or damaged
Yeah.
In shipping and handling the material and offloading. But at the end of the day, if it works, your and the appearance doesn't matter, but it works, your subs are going to be upset with that because, well, it fully functions, it just has a scratch in it, and you've got to go back to your specifications and you got to go back to the contracts, and if damage is damage, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so those are conflicts, really big
common conflict. Yeah. And data column is another example. Sometimes those components have to be kept at a certain humidity or temperature, right? And if they see that hasn't been done, even though there's no damage to the component, sometimes they won't accept it. And I've had that happen too. Yeah. So you're going to see conflicts over material handling. You're going to see conflicts over prep meetings, especially on federal projects. If there's turnover of leads, lead foremans, leads on crews, and they feel like the crew is no longer adhering to contract and or safety, right? If you have an incident, then you're going to have to re-prep. So subs need to understand up front that if there's going to be turnover of their lead people, that they're going to probably have to have another prep meeting. And that's been a conflict. We've definitely gone toe-to-toe in the dirt. I've had subs just scream in my face before, and you've got to remain calm and cool. QC managers, it's not our job to make the call of the switching out of the sub, so you always have to handle conflicts with subcontractors. Like you can't make a change, so you've got to find a resolution to the conflict and make it work.
With the preparatory meetings, in QC 101 we talk about this quite a bit, and you've probably already taken it. In your preparatory meetings, the biggest conflict that we have is you won't have the foreman show up that's going to be managing the dirt and the work in the field. You'll have an owner show up, or you have an estimator, or you'll have a project manager show up, and you can't prep them.
No, because it's got to be the guys in the dirt,
the foremen in the field that are managing the dirt, and sometimes they get very upset and they get very frustrated. Well, if that project manager, if that estimator, if that owner is going to be there every day managing the work, then sure, go right ahead. Right. But that's a typical one. When you're out looking, toe to toe in the dirt, when you're out doing your inspections and or you've got the client with you, or a third party inspector, and the installers get upset, this isn't personal. It's just business. And you've really got to manage that well.
Absolutely.
If you've got a client that's, talking smack, or you've got a installer that is frustrated because what you're saying they've installed doesn't meet spec, those are really common conflicts that you have, and you just got to remain cool. If you need to bring in your superintendent or your project manager to help mitigate that, if you need to take a step back, walk away to help diffuse the situation, it's going to happen. You're a QC. It's going to happen.
Yeah, QC requirements as a whole is a big point of contention, and mostly it's because they don't understand the requirements. And sometimes you get new subcontractors that have never been held to QC requirements, and they don't understand. And so they bucket, and we've had subs walk off. We've had subs threaten to walk off. I mean, anything you can imagine. I had an older gentleman sit in a modular that was going to be a dental facility, and when the project was done, he walked into my trailer and said, "Darling, you retired me on this one. I put in my notice with my company, and I'm done." I took that to heart. I felt so bad for the longest time. For the longest time, I thought I was so rough on that poor guy that he decided he wanted to retire. And in the end, after years in the dirt, you come to understand that was just his time. That was the time for him to hang up his dance shoes and move on to something else. And you wish him well. But as a QC manager, you definitely are going to have to mitigate conflicts with subcontractors. Another one that we see is startup and commissioning commitments. So a lot of times they don't put money in their bids to do startup per contract or to be part of the commissioning team, and MEP subs are part of the commissioning team. And that's why we do have subcontractor training specifically for startup and commissioning, so they can understand their commitment up front. But that's another point of contention. I don't have time to walk. I don't have time for this meeting. I'm not going to go. I don't have time to make notes and mark things off in your commissioning book.
Why am I here? You're not even looking at my stuff.
Yeah, we've heard it all. But that's just not the way the process works. So that jumps us right into resolution options, right? Training before a project starts of your subcontractors makes 80% of these conflicts go away. And we have got proven subcontractor training that's part of our QC University that you got with this package. And whether you watch it and then, train your subs, or whether you literally just push play in a conference room, get them in a conference room and say, I need you to sit here and watch this, and push play. We'll talk right through it. We'll train them for you. And that training will save you so much. I'm going to let Greg talk about the next bullet because it's near and dear to his heart, but email documentation.
You've got to email document everything, right?
Yeah.
You've got
it's all CYA, unfortunately. The day of our handshakes and verbals, it's just not there anymore.
Whether you're sending daily reports or whether you're sending notification to procure, or a submittal is approved or disapproved, or
a summary of a conversation you have in the dirt.
That's right.
Hey, Joe, we talked about this in the dirt today. You're going to make sure that windowsill is sealed, right, on the west side of the building. I mean, whatever it is, you have to have that paper trail.
Yeah, and another really nice thing about email is you can do read and delivery receipts to back up, what you've sent. You just, unfortunately, we're not living 50, 60 years ago where everything is done on a handshake and everybody's got the memory of an elephant. You've got to not only document things for yourself, but it's also documentation for them.
Absolutely. And written meeting minutes, whether that is subcontractor meetings weekly or the owner meetings. Sometimes we're lucky enough as QC managers to have a PM that has an assistant, or a PM that wants to run those meetings and document them. That's awesome when they do that. Let them do it. You've got enough paper. But 99% of the time, that falls on us. And we keep the notes, and we update it, and we save the meeting minutes. So those meeting minutes are worth gold, and they will be something that you reference over and over again throughout the project.
It's project record.
Yeah, absolutely. So training with subs, train them, right? Train them on the QC requirements up front. Make sure they understand what they've signed. And then make sure you're doing your documentation.
A little bit of training up front can save you a vast amount of time later on down the road.
So much. I know Greg has made a comment to it throughout the different trainings, but not only do we, QC our own work, but we're brought in to do cleanup for subcontractors and contractors. We're brought in to do audits. We're brought in to do closeout. And we've seen it over and over again. And on one site, we had a QC on. That project manager called me one day completely frantic, and his dirt sub was going to walk off, and he didn't understand how to do a submittal, and the first attempt he made at it, he claimed cost him hours to do, and it wasn't even hitting the mark, and he wasn't going to waste his time and money, and he was going to leave. And the PM said, I can't afford to replace him because they bid low, and I will lose everything on this project if I replace him. And I went to site. And I walked in, and it was literally as easy as asking him when I walked in, what can I do to help you today? And that took him off guard. And he said, no one has even asked me that question. And he said, I can't believe you asked. And I said, I get that, but what can I do to help? And I said, if you'll send me the person doing your submittals and have them sit here for even an hour with me, we'll run through submittal 101 training. And I can train him so that he hits the mark, and these don't cost you any extra money. And he said, I'll give you a shot. And he stayed on, and he let me train his staff. And he said, no one's ever offered to help us and train us like that. And he said, I can't afford, I can't afford to pay for it. I said, yeah, this is a freebie. Come sit in, let me do it. And let's get you back on the right track. And it saved the project. And ultimately, it was a client for us forever, right? And a friend for us and a client for us forever. Just because we were human. Sometimes it just takes being a human and training and taking time to help your sub, because if your subs don't succeed, you don't succeed. The whole project won't succeed if a subcontract goes under. So it's pretty important. Remember to be a human. Oh, and this is our little referee. This is where you're going to get most of your conflicts. This is between subs, and you are going to have to referee. And that lands on the QC. I should just put big QC on that little ref's back, because unfortunately we get that role. Examples of conflicts that we've had: painters and drywall folks. They do not mix. That's oil and water right there. And they like to point fingers. And the painters blame the drywallers, and the drywallers say there's nothing wrong with the wall, and it's the painters don't know how to paint it. And it's just an age-old conflict right there. Electrical and mechanical boys in a mech room. They fight for space. We never get a mech room that's big enough, folks. I think the mech room should be like a 4-car garage in every building. And they always give us a closet. So there's always going to be battles between those two. Electrical and mechanical at startup and commissioning, they're going to point fingers. It's going to happen. Startup checks and mechanical, got to get copies of those startup reports. That's a conflict we see all the time. Dirt and compaction testing. Don't know how many times I've had dirt work folks tell me that the testing agency we've got out there is throwing the nukes down, and they're running nukes that aren't calibrated, and there's no way that didn't meet compaction, and they're not coming out to test soon enough and quick enough for them, and they're holding them up. The list goes on and on. And then furniture and electric or comm guys. They don't talk to each other, and then the furniture package comes, and the outlets aren't where they need to be to hook the furniture up, and rework, disaster. So these are typical conflicts we have between subs. We could talk probably hours on each one. I literally had to get in between a painter and a drywall. They're both dear friends of mine now, but they almost started swinging.
Yeah, you know,
that was pretty spectacular. I have lots of fun memories.
When you're going through and you've got level 3, level 4 finishes for drywall, and then you've got a painter that comes in, and then you punch the paint, and the painter's, the painter is saying, well, it's defects or ripples on the drywall, and the drywaller's saying it's the painter, they don't know how to paint. Like Renee said, the resolution option for that is a room sign-off.
Yeah,
the drywall gets
absolutely.
hung, and you bring the painter in and the drywaller in, and they accept it.
And once they sign and accept the room, then if the paint doesn't work, that's on the painter, and that takes all that away. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. In-wall inspections take an awful lot away of the conflict. Above ceiling inspections before tiles dropped, because ultimately someone's always going to complain that they weren't done up there before the tiles dropped. And then startup reports, I know we talked about that. And we talk about it in several of the other modules. Make sure you get, bootleg copies of those startup reports before the startup guys leave, because that's really going to keep the flow of the commissioning and testing process for you going. This slide isn't supposed to scare you. I don't want the new QCs to take this and think, oh man, I don't want to get in between and fights and fist fights, and I don't want to be a ref. I don't want this to scare you. This whole module is hopefully so that you don't feel alone. When you're out there in the dirt and you're on a project and you run into one of these, I want you to go, oh yeah, I knew this was coming. I've heard this can be a problem. This is how I think I can resolve this. Like, that's what this slide is for. It's just to give you guys some examples of things we've seen so that you don't. I remember the first time I had some conflicts, I just thought, man, how did I draw this short straw?
Yeah.
And what the heck do I do?
Yeah. You know, painters and drywallists, the room sign offs. The electrical and the mechanical in the mechanical room vying for the space. You're in my space. I need me more room.
It's getting all the boys in the room together.
It's coordination.
It's
coordination
yeah.
drawings.
Yeah.
You know, the electrical and mechanical at startup and commissioning. Why do they need to be there? It's explaining why they need to be there.
Yeah.
Startup technicians and mechanical, again, why they need to be there, getting the reports in a timely fashion.
Yeah. And sometimes little things that come up during startup for electrical, mechanical, and the startup techs, they can be resolved right there if you have all the players right there. So for 30 minutes when they're starting the equipment up, if they're right there and there's one wire that didn't get landed or one thing here that needs to be tweaked.
Motors running backwards.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, how many motors have we found backwards? Anyway, that can be taken care of when they're there. So
dirt and compaction testing, you know, it's making sure it's your responsibility to schedule the third-party tester to make sure that they're there at the appropriate times that the civil contractor needs them.
Yes.
It's mitigating the conflict there to make sure that they have equipment in the field that's calibrated. They know how to work the calibration. If you need to get a hold of the third-party testing agency to bring another machine out or bring out a senior technician to validate what's going on and getting in the middle of that's your job. The furniture package and where the electrical and the telecom is.
Absolutely.
Making sure that those contractors are working together early to vet their drawings out to make sure that, hey, you know, if you would have taken 15 minutes 6 months before the package showed up to discover that an adapter or a plug or a location was going to be in the wrong spot, if that was vetted out early, you wouldn't have that conflict.
Yeah, getting the furniture guys out when the electrical is getting roughed in to take a look at things is really the best way to tackle that. And a big part of quality control is conflict resolution. And that's a big part of your whole world. And what you're going to find is none of us have time for conflict, and we don't want it, and we don't have time. So what do? We find ways to mitigate it, and our ways to mitigate it are with quality control and with control processes, whether that's sign-off sheets or tracking forms or meetings in the dirt. And then once you find those solutions, you will adapt those for every project going forward. It just becomes your process, and you're going to learn, you know, the subs in your area may have conflict over different things, right? I'm not saying you're going to go through this module and never have any conflicts ever again because you're going to mitigate them all. That's not going to happen, but you're going to definitely understand a big portion of your project and your job is conflict resolution.
And at the end of the day, you may find yourself, you know, backed into a corner, not literally, but you've done absolutely everything that you can do to mitigate the conflict between the particular subcontractors that you have. And you may need to bring your superintendent in. You may need to bring your project manager in.
Your team is there for a reason.
You need to rely on your team after you've done everything that you can do to help mitigate the issues that you're having. You know, if it's, you know, talking to your superintendent and saying, well, these two subs aren't getting along and they happen to be working in the same area, maybe the superintendent can move them around a little bit and get them out of each other's hair. And, you know, and if that fails, getting the project manager involved, and then they'll sit down with the ownership of those companies and they'll hash it out. And
sometimes you'll run into a QA that's working for the client, right? That's going to be hard, you know, to get along with. And a lot of times that's a partnering meeting, right, where everybody gets in the room and you kumbaya it and you figure out how to partner and move forward. So we've definitely been on sites where that's necessary too. So there's always ways to mitigate, and there's always a resolution, and it's just putting as many of those resolution options in your toolbox so that when it comes up, you can handle it.
Remaining calm is the key.
Yeah, calm and fair and consistent. And remember, you know, just remember your job, right? Your job is to report on what is there and to make sure that what is being built meets plans and specs. No more and no less. And that's your job. So, and that takes us to the end of this module, and we really appreciate you guys coming and listening in with us and learning about conflict resolution.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time greatly that you've spent with us. Renee and I have had all of these problems in the field before. I'm sure, if you're a seasoned QC,
you've got a whole lot.
You've had many more. If you're a brand new QC trying to get some training underneath your belt, and it's going to be okay.
And if you got something that it kind of hitting you different and you don't really know how to handle it, bring it to our monthly live Q&A sessions.
Yeah.
Bring it up. Let's talk about it. Let's chew on it.
You're not alone.
Yeah, ultimately, that's the goal. You're not alone.
You're not the only QC out there that's having this exact issue, and you've got a family out there that you can lean on.
Absolutely. We appreciate it, and we will see you on the next one. We're really excited to have you guys today. My name is Renee.
And I'm Greg.
And today we want to discuss relationships and your site image as a QC manager.
Very important.
So topics in this quick little module is going to be, we're going to talk about reputation. We're going to discuss customer filter. We're going to talk about some site etiquette. And then we're going to wrap up discussing relationships with subcontractors. So let's get into it. Let's talk about reputation. Let's talk about your reputation as a quality control manager.
It's what you have.
It's everything that you have. It's so important. It's what's going to write your ticket for your next job and your next job and your next job. It literally sets your whole career. It's really important to understand the balance between your reputation as a QC and the reputation of the company you work for, whether that is a general contractor, a GC, or a subcontractor. So we see a lot of QC managers make a lot of mistakes with this. I've seen QC managers that are only out for their reputation, and they'll buddy up with end users, and they will throw their GC or their subcontractor under the bus. And that is not the way to build your reputation, because your next job will be based on references. It is really important that your current employer, that's who's signing your check, whether that's the subcontractor or the general contractor that you work for. It is important that they have felt that you have done the job and protected them as a quality control manager. It is a balancing act, and we understand that, and we know there's going to be times the client is going to come to you and they're going to be expressing concerns, and you're going to feel like you're kind of stuck in the middle. But to me, I think that it's extremely important to always, always, always remember who signs your check. That has always steered me in the right direction. The clients obviously have always liked our QC managers because of their honesty and because of how well they have done their job. And that in itself should be that relationship with an end user.
There's ways to walk that line. When you fill out your resume, these projects that you're working on and the contractors that you're working for and the clients on the projects that you're building for, all that information goes down in your resume.
It does.
And your prospective, future employers, they're going to call those people up and they're going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want them to say is, they did everything that we told them to, they were fair, they reported the facts, and they knew how to QC.
Right.
What you don't want to have happen is that they're calling up on your references and you don't want your QC is constantly butting heads with the owner, and they didn't do what I needed them to do, and they weren't doing what they should have in the field, and it's your reputation as a QC. That's your product, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to pull up and show off your fancy car, and that's your reputation, or your tools isn't your reputation. It's who you are as an individual.
And I think that as a compass for your true north, you have to always remember your job as a QC manager is to ensure that what is being installed meets contractual specs and prints. That's your job. And if the company you're working for does that and puts it in and puts it into specs and contract, then you have to defend them. And that is your job. Your job's to be their hired gun at that point, and then to prove to the client that what's there does meet what they paid for in the contract. But then on the other flip side, if it doesn't meet, then you're there to protect the end user and the client's wishes then, and you have to go back to the contractor and the employer that you work for and say, we haven't put this into plans and specs, and this is what is wrong. So that's your true north, but you just need to stay away. There's no room on a site for a knitting circle. There's no room for tea. No, don't be spilling the tea. Don't be, Jack Smith covered this up, and this is the worst contractor I've ever worked for. And as soon as that's a slippery slope, and as soon as you get in a relationship with a client or an end user like that, there's no going back, and your reputation will definitely take a big hit. It's just not worth it. You do not slam the contractor that you work for.
You can't let you're an integral part to that job site and to that team. And you cannot let the toxicity of one or two people or contractors on a job site reflect on the person that you are.
No.
It's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to pull yourself out of that. It's hard to insulate yourself from that. But those are also the things that employers are looking for, when they're looking at considering you for their next project is, that's part of your reputation.
And end users will actually respect you more if they know you're doing your job well.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yep.
Customer filter. So we kind of touched on this, but clients are not your buddies. And I've even had QCs on our staff learn this the hard way. End users and clients, you don't go out and have a beer with them after work because then tea gets spilled. They are just not your buddies. You have to always have a customer filter. You need to keep those boundaries. It is a customer that the company you are working for, again, the people that are writing your check, are building for, right? So you need to keep those boundaries with the end users and with the clients, no matter who they are. On federal work, and most of you guys that are in the QCU right now are on federal projects. That's why you came to us. And on federal work, ethically, you have to keep boundaries, especially on gifts and favors. We have had very close relationships with folks that have fallen prey, and now they have federal offenses. Federal offenses over very simple things. We're not talking extravagant gifts of trips on a boat, a fishing charter, right? We're not talking things that big. My personal relationship, the gentleman literally just gave away a few landscape railroad ties for landscaping purposes in a yard, right? And in a person's residence. And that is a federal offense. So gifts and favors over a certain dollar amount is a federal offense. So just keep that boundary. Just don't make it a habit. Don't do gifts. Don't do favors. Don't take them. Don't give them. Keep your nose clean because it's absolutely not worth it, especially in the federal world. I've seen it destroy men. I've seen it destroy families. I've seen it destroy companies. So don't let it be you.
Yeah, and on a more,
I'm like doom and gloom. Here's a more positive note.
Yeah, that's definitely an extreme case, but you guys really gotta, watch out as far as your ethical boundaries go. It's hard hat stickers, it's your swag for the project sites, it's buying somebody lunch, tagging along, getting a car ride. You guys really, really gotta watch that. It's the clients. You need to have an amenable, respectful relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to share jokes, you're going to cut up and things like that. But, they are there to receive the product that you are building, nothing more, nothing less. They have a job to do as well, and they are your counterpart as quality assurance, and they have their job to do. So, remember to keep that relationship clean,
right.
And they'll respect you more for it.
Absolutely. So now we're going to get into a little bit on site etiquette. So quality control managers protect the general contractors and the subs along with the end users, and we talked about that a couple slides ago. So that's your job. Your job is to protect the end product. And the end product has to go in per plans and specs contractually. And if that is happening and the clients wanted, a Cadillac and they bought a Honda, they bought a Honda. And it's your job to tell them, this is your Honda. It's amazing. This is what the Honda can do. You didn't buy a Cadillac. You bought a Honda. But vice versa, if they did buy that Cadillac, they better be getting the Cadillac. I mean, that's just goes without saying. So you just have to remember that you are there to protect the GCs and the subs along with the end users. And so whether you're working for a sub or even the subs of the GC you're working for, right? I mean, again, that product ultimately falls under the GC's umbrella. So you're there to help those subs too. And you really need to get that attitude. And when you get that attitude as a quality control manager, it makes your job so much easier. Let's face it, being a QC manager is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, and it wouldn't be worth the money and the time. And it just wouldn't be worth what it's worth because it would be easy. So it's already hard enough. Don't make it harder on yourself, making it really muddy for etiquette and for you and your reputation in the field. Keep it clean and just remember that you are there to protect your GC and subs under the GC just as much as you are with the end user. And you get so much more bees with honey. So much is important on how you approach everything in the field, having a positive attitude, like Greg said, not getting bogged down in the site politics and some of the disgruntledness. Every site, especially the ones that seem to run over on project schedule, can get a little bit disgruntled, but being that beacon of positivity and trying to stay upbeat and separate and from that really makes all the difference. And pick your battles, right? I mean, if I go out there and I'm wanting someone to fix something, pick your battles on what's severe enough to get. Everything has to be to plans and specs. I'm not going to say it doesn't. But if I go out there and I don't like the finish in one corner of the room, which could be caught with a flashlight test, and those that have been in the industry, you know what I'm talking about, versus I'm missing a duct damper that has to be in there to do balance, I'm going to definitely go fight on the balance damper, right? So every single battle, every single thing that you inspect is going to be on a certain list of severity. And sometimes you're going to have to pick your battles. And you're going to learn that as you go along. And you're definitely going to get more experience under your belt. And then you'll feel more confident picking those battles. But just know that that is a thing. Every QC manager out there picks their battles. Consistency is key. And as long as you are consistent and fair with what you find, and that is true, and you're honest, then your etiquette and your reputation is going to take off without you, and it's going to be great, and you're not going to have anything to worry about.
Agreed.
Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Summed it all up.
All right. So now we're going to talk about relationships with subcontractors. Greg's already smiling. This is some of his favorite stuff. I say this all the time. You hear us say it all the time. When your subcontractors succeed, you succeed. And by succeed, we mean make money. Your subs need to make money. Now, if you're working for the sub, he definitely needs to make money. And if you're working for the general contractor, those subs are not going to want to pair with your GC again if they lose their butt on the project. So it's important. Honesty always and consistency, right? So as long as you're honest and you're honest with what you find, honey makes the medicine go down so much easier. When you got to walk into the electrician's job trailer and tell him that he's running in the mechanical space and he's got to move everything that his crew's done for the day, as long as you're honest and you can show on the plans and specs where it clearly showed it, go with your backup. Hey man, I'm real sorry. I just caught this. This is not going to work. We need to roundtable this. We need to get on this really quick. But just be consistent and be honest.
Yeah, you're when you go to approach your subcontractors out in the field, you want to talk to them and you're not better than they are.
No.
You're already the QC on the project is already labeled as the tattletale.
You're the
narc,
narc, right?
You're the narc.
Yeah.
You're the guy that's, a guy or gal that's out there trying to catch everybody in a lie, and that's not what it is.
Not what we're doing.
You're there to help, and when you go to a subcontractor, and you're constantly finding issues with a particular product or process, and you want them to succeed, maybe you need to stop and re-prep them instead of constantly, digging them up with observations or, or failures or things like that. And that's the honey part, right? You want to see them succeed. You want to help them get to the finish line because that's part of your job.
Yeah.
And if they know that if they've got a problem with something and they can come to you, and you are there and consistently fair and consistently, non-abrasive,
right?
And you're explaining what you're doing in the field, and even when you're coming around the corner and taking pictures, and,
this is a big,
let the guys know in the area, hey guys, I'm just taking some pictures for the daily report, or I'm just documenting your progress. I'm not trying to catch you guys doing anything that you're not supposed to.
And sometimes you're catching good stuff, so tell them, right? Man, these labels in this pipe run or this conduit is amazing. The way you guys have done your transitions, this is beautiful work. I'm just taking a picture because this is what we want to set as an example. Well, that's gonna build their confidence up, and then they're not on edge. So what you don't want to do is be going through there like a little slippery snake, taking pictures of the guys and what they're doing and girls and everything that's going on, and then they're wondering, well, what did they catch? What did they think they saw? What do they think is the problem? Sometimes it's a safety issue. I've taken pictures of shields while welders are welding just to prove that we had the shields up, and the welders literally stop what they're doing to ask me what's wrong. And it's just, you don't want to stop progress. You're not there to make any progress stops. And just 5 seconds of being a human. Hey, I'm just taking pictures so we can prove that you had your shield up just like you're supposed to. Good job. Thanks. Then they feel like you're protecting them. And again, that's part of our job. We protect the subs and the GCs just as much as we protect the end user.
Absolutely.
So being a human and taking 5 minutes, or a few minutes to just explain what you're doing. I worked for a general contractor, and I had a fleet of QCs, and they had a division in medium voltage. And me, I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not a double E, and none of the QCs I had on staff understood medium voltage very well. And so I had one of the linemen come into my office, and he was very irate and let me know that my QC was asking all kinds of questions. It was very annoying, and he wanted to know exactly what my QC wanted and why they were asking so many questions. And I literally had to stop, look up at the man, because I am 5'2" on a very good day with maybe a heeled boot. And this guy was close to 7 feet tall. And I had to look all the way up at him and explain, my QC is not trying to be annoying and trying to catch anything that they're doing wrong. He just doesn't understand medium voltage, and we want to learn. And when I said those words, his whole demeanor changed. I swear that 7-foot monster became maybe a 6-foot teddy bear. And he said, that's sincerely all that your team's wanting? And I said, yes. And the next thing you knew, he and his guys were taking time to train my fleet of QCs on the medium voltage information that they needed to know. And that's literally all it took. So I've seen it happen on my team sites over and over again. I've seen it happen on other team sites over and over again. Literally, just take the time.
Communication.
Just communication. Just take the time to be a human and talk to everybody in the field. And then they're not going to be jumpy the next time you come around that corner with the camera. Half the time, they're probably always going to think you're finding good crap they're doing, even though you may catch an error here and there. But if you set that precedence from the start, then they're not going to be jumpy when they're seeing you come through and doing your inspections. And it's going to make the whole atmosphere on the site different. And it's going to work for your advantage. Taking time to train and help your subcontractors with paper is our last bullet here. So I have definitely done the full gambit. I have had subs that I had to carry all the way across the finish line. I have done certain paperwork that I wouldn't recommend any QC take that liability on to do for subs to help them get across. And that's why we've made the Subcontractor MasterClass. And inside QCU, if you're inside here with us, you got a copy of that. Literally take time to train your subs set them in a conference room before they hit the dirt, or in the job trailer, set up a laptop, hit play on that, make them sit through that MasterClass. It will save you so much headache and so much time on the back end. It will really help the sub to understand. But training your subs on how to do it right and working with them, then you've got a subcontractor for life, and you don't have to do it but once unless they have staff come and go that needs to be trained. But you'll always have that training package so you can use it over and over again. But that literally helps tremendously. We had a QC manager on another project site for another general contractor, and that general contractor called me in a panic because their main dirt sub was getting ready to walk off. And their words to me was, there's no way I can buy that out. I can't buy around them. Their number was too low. I will lose my life on this project if they walk off. And I said, tell them to wait 10 minutes. And I got in my truck and ran from one side of the base to his site. And I walked in the trailer, and the sub had every vein on his neck and his head poking out, and he was red, and he was done talking. He was just one out of there. And I, tried to figure out what the problem was, and he had never done submittals, and he just didn't know how, and it seemed like an insurmountable mountain, and it seemed like a cost that he hadn't figured in, and he was angry and fed up, and the GC was just trying to cram it down his throat, highway or my way or the highway. And I literally looked at that general contractor and said, give me an hour. Let me run you through some submittal training. Give me 1 hour. And after that hour, you still want to walk, then that's your choice. But I think you're going to see it's not that big of a problem, and you can handle it, and we can make all this frustration go away. And he said, you would do that for free? And I said, yeah. So if you're in the QCU and you've got that subcontractor training, use that. Tell your subs you will train them for free. Use that. They will see that you're investing in them and the relationship with them. After the hour, the gentleman knew exactly how to put together the submittal package that the contractor needed. He went back, turned it around within 48 hours, and they were back digging in the dirt, and it saved the project. So that's all it takes. It just takes being a human and taking the time to train your subs. All right. And that takes us to the end. And I really appreciate you joining us. And we can't wait to see you on the next one.
Just remember, everybody, reputation is what you got. More bees with honey. And just be safe out there.
Absolutely.